Christine Schneider, the visceral voice.
Welcome to the Visceral Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Christine Schneider. Through this podcast, I aim to bring you the most current, up-to-date research on voice science, function, pain science, movement, and everything in between. I am on a quest to learn everything I can about the living, breathing body and its intricate connection to the voice. This podcast documents the continuation of my learning and my experience as a professional singer, a nutritional consultant, a movement specialist, and a manual therapist. Join us as we strive to provide current, knowledgeable, creative, and compassionate information to help you restore, regain, and create happiness and success on your vocal journey. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, I have a conversation with the amazing Melissa Wegner. Melissa is the executive director of the Metropolitan Opera's Lindemann Young Artist Development Program and the Laffont Competition. She is responsible for identifying, awarding, and developing the world's most promising operatic talent. Having joined the artistic staff of the Met in 2011, she hears artists in stage and screening auditions at the Met and is additionally responsible for casting the Met's New Opera Commission's workshops. I had such a wonderful conversation with Melissa. I was so thrilled to be able to talk about something I know nothing about, which is adjudicating. So judging these elite vocal competitions and going around the country and the world and experiencing some of the top voices in the industry. So such an incredible career and such a wonderful, wonderful human. And I'm so grateful to have met Melissa this year and been able to work with her. And so I am very excited to introduce you to our conversation, Judging Elite Vocal Competitions with Melissa Wegner. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited about this conversation. But before we dive into the topic today, I would love to invite you to tell us about your journey into becoming the executive director of the Metropolitan Opera Lindemann Young Artist Development Program and of the Laffont Competition and everything, all of the amazing things that you do. What was your journey?
So I started out as a singer, and also all the way from undergrad, I double majored in music business and vocal performance. So from the very beginning, I've kind of had my mind set on combining my skill set in a way that could be really meaningful for me. And I was never really, I don't know if satisfied is the right word, but I didn't really feel fulfilled doing just one or the other. Really from undergrad on, I pursued both things. I really felt that singing had a bit of a ticking clock with it, you know, especially as sort of a light lyric soprano, like so many out there. I knew that I had to buckle down and work on the singing part of it on the earlier side and not think that I could just table that for later. So I followed both paths, and I got 3 degrees in vocal performance, and I also worked the entire time on the music business side of things. And I got to a point after that last degree where I realized that in order to really, if I really wanted the singing career to happen, that I was going to have to fully focus on it. And again, that just isn't what made me feel the most fulfilled. At that point, I loved living in New York City, and I knew that I would probably need to leave New York City as a home base if I wanted to take the right steps for what I was going to need to focus on as a singer. So I just sort of, the metaphor that I use a lot is trying to make it as a young soprano felt a little bit like rowing upstream in a river. And so I just decided to bring the oars in and just ride and see where the river was going to take me. So I was fortunate that I had been working on the business side of things for a long time. So I had something that I was equally passionate about that I was able to, it didn't feel as much like a pivot for me as it did kind of walking a parallel path. And I was really, really glad that my first full-time salary job was with the Met, working as the associate director of the competition. So now it's been 12 years since being at the Met. This is my 12th season. And it's really been a great thing for me. And it's been an ideal situation for me to get to use all of the vocal and artistic training that I had. And I get to use that on a daily basis, but also all of the business side of things and the strategy. And I mean, I love spreadsheets. I love budgets. And I love kind of finding the elegance of really, I don't know, exciting new operational strategies as much as I do the elusive hunt for a great vowel. So I was lucky that I got to find this position and now positions that allow me to use all of that.
Yeah. A lot of that resonates with me, just with my transition into more body work and then kind of helping voice teachers looking different views. So bringing different views into the voice studio of bringing some anatomy and self-care and movement into the actual voice, but coming from a standpoint of being a professional voice user and having my degree in voice. So that definitely resonates with me. And also something I think about is one of the things I think a lot of professional voice users and certainly singers miss is the business side. And when you're a professional performer, you're having to put yourself out there. So it's not even a product that you're trying to sell or anything. It is part of you. So to be able to have the business side and the performance side, I think every performer needs that. But how incredible that you feel and felt passionate about both paths and that it was able to come together in such a beautiful way. So today we are going to talk about judging and competitions. And this I'm very excited about because this is probably the first topic on my podcast that I know absolutely nothing about. So I'm so excited to learn from you because you know so much about judging. How did you get into becoming a judge of any competition, let alone the Laffont competition?
Sure. So when I started as the associate director of the competition, I was working under the longtime executive director, Galitha Nichols. And Galitha is a longtime presence, and she still is working now with the Santa Fe Opera Apprentice program. So she has really just an incredible history of helping to identify and nurture young artist talent. So what they did with me was, first of all, the competition, the Met competition, has districts and regions throughout North America. So at some points it's been upwards of 40 districts and 12, 13 regions. And right now we're at 36 districts and 11 regions. So I started out my first year or two observing. So I was traveling to the competitions to make sure from an operational standpoint that our fantastic volunteers were, in compliance isn't the right word, but just sort of making sure that the philosophy and spirit of our guidelines was being followed. And also making sure if there were any questions that I could answer from national and ways that I could be of help for all of the great work that they do. That was sort of one of the reasons why I was there. The other reason was to hone my ears. So all of our competitions have panels of 3 judges, and I would get to be in the judge room with those judges, listening to how they spoke about singers, listening to the words that they would use, getting a sense of everyone's ears. And our judge list is comprised of industry professionals from around North America that are, I'll speak to the way that I curate that list now. It's people who are in the position to further the careers of young singers so they can help connect singers to opportunities, whether that be a graduate school program, a summer festival, hiring them in a professional sense, and also people that can give good feedback to singers, because giving verbal feedback is part of what we do. So I spent the first couple years on the job listening to, our colleagues at every level of the business doing exactly that, speaking about singers behind closed doors and speaking to them directly. And doing that in all different parts of the country. So I have a really interesting bird's eye view of what's going on in the voice area in North America and how things change when a new teacher moves to town or a young artist program closes. Also have a really good sense of different venues so that when I see something on someone's resume, I have an understanding of what it means that they sung that role in that house. So a lot of those kind of intangible things were what I was collecting in my first couple years. And that's also towards the end of the second year, I think, is when I started judging at the district level. And then I moved up from there. And I also started assisting the former associate administrator, artistic administrator at the Met, Lenore Rosenberg. And so in that capacity, I was helping to coordinate and sitting in on all of the screening auditions for the Met, which we call like list hall auditions. Those are primarily singers that are coming in looking to be cast as covers and in our compromario small roles. So between that experience of having one room to go to and hear many people, and then going to many different rooms and getting different colleagues' perspectives, plus traveling around in the summer to different festivals, going to university productions, going to professional productions. All of that is the work that has gone into kind of developing not only my ears, but also my vocabulary.
Yeah. When you mentioned 36 districts and 11 regions, when you set up the competition, and how is it district to regional or regional to district to national?
Yes. And what we've done post-pandemic, what we did mid-pandemic, was we started having a qualifying round on video. And the interesting thing is that before the pandemic even started, I'm on some panels with Opera America, and I had said to them, we need to address something that we've already been doing for decades, and we actually don't provide any training in it. And that is creating and adjudicating videos. So we already started those conversations before the pandemic happened. And then when the pandemic happened, of course, we had to shift. And what we did for the competition was go completely virtual. And for me, because our program is throughout North America, it's very important that I have a strong sense of values and ethics that our program standards are based on. So we really quickly pulled that together and were able to meet with our many judges so that they understood what we are listening for, what we are not listening for. All that being said, the videos are a pro and a con. I think anyone who is going to be continuing this career into the future are people who record well and sing well live. So I don't think it's an unfair first step. And I have to say, back when I was applying for undergrad, I submitted tapes. I mean, there was already an audio screening version back over 20 years ago. So that's kind of what I'm talking about, is like we've already been using video as a screening tool, but I think what's important is to understand like the limits of it.
Sure.
And also from an equity perspective, think about what people have access to. So there are now many places where you can get resources of how to make those good videos. But yeah, now we have a qualifying round on video, and it's our competition team who does all that pre-screening. We generally have had over 1,100 or 1,200 applicants every year. Wow. So I personally listen to at least over 800.
Wow.
And then the district round is the first round that's live. And then those filter into the regions. So all of those are happening through the fall, like really October through February. And this next season, the finals are going to be on March 17.
Wow. So you personally watched about 800 videos. How long does it take you to watch these videos? A month. Yeah. And that's quick because you're a very busy person.
Well, that's what I really like dedicate a month to it. And I'm also pretty rigorous about the way that I do that. And I make sure, again, like, I think that if I'm asking people to go through the process of recording it, that I should give them the respect of listening to it carefully. So I use the same set of headphones. I sit in a chair with the same laptop, with the same evaluation criteria. And that's my job. It's not an, ancillary part of what I do. It is literally my job. For the way the competition works, that's the month of August for me.
The month of August. So talking about the judges for a moment, are most of the judges or are all of the judges volunteer?
For the competition, yeah. They all volunteer their time. They don't receive any sort of honorarium. Their expenses are covered. So they don't have to, personally foot the bill to fly to these places, but they are volunteers.
Sure. And for a new judge, someone who's just coming in, have they observed like you have, or have they judged other competitions before they're accepted as a judge into this program?
Generally, they are people who have served as judges in other capacities, even if it's, screening candidates for a university program or for their own program. But also I do a whole judge orientation. We have like a whole list of guidelines, and I do a whole shindig with that so that everyone feels fully prepped for what we're listening for and how we speak about it.
Yeah. So speaking of what you're listening for, your evaluation criteria, what's involved in your evaluation criteria?
So for the competition, I asked the judges to evaluate at every level on 4 main things. The voice, meaning, the vocal gift, how they're using it technically, and are they singing the repertoire that suits that voice? We're listening for their musical skills, their musicality. So notes, pitches, accuracy, rhythms. Does Mozart sound like Mozart? Does Verdi sound like Verdi? All of the things that go into that kind of musical bucket are another category. Then we have interpretation, which includes the dramatic work. It also includes the way that they're using language and text to communicate. And it can include some of the physical aspects of like how they are creating a character in space. And then the last one is potential, career potential. And all of these are extremely subjective. I think that's the one where everyone has different ideas of how someone could or couldn't find their way through this career path. But that's also the one where, if there's a specialty voice, if there's a specialty tenor who sounds like you might be going to the Helden tenor repertoire, and there's only a handful of those that we hear every season, that's a different career path than, using myself as the example, the young light lyric soprano, where you're in a much bigger pool.
For the listeners who are desiring an operatic path, do you have recommendations of how to prepare for such an elite competition?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the most important things is to think about what you can control. One of the things you can control is your repertoire choice. I will say that it's important to think about what is showing you at your best right now, and also something that you connect to, because ultimately we want to be moved. We, all of these skills that we're practicing in practice rooms and coaching sessions, they're all about communication in the end. So if you're singing something because your teacher thought it would be a good idea, but you just don't like it, we're going to sense that. So that idea of choosing repertoire that is meaningful to you, but also shows, the best of what you can do right now. Sometimes your favorite piece is not the one that shows you at your best. Also for us, it's a vocal competition. It's not a casting audition. So in terms of that, I'm always listening first for the voice and the quality of singing that's happening. So you're going to want to have something that shows what you can do in the first page, especially. If you're singing an aria just because at the end of the 5th page there's a high B that you do pretty well, it's not necessarily going to be the thing that keeps our attention. So I think there's that. I think also trying to figure out how to create opportunities for yourself to practice auditioning. Sometimes this can mean putting together mock auditions with people in your vocal studio, or even just giving yourself more chances to perform, doing recitals at a community center or a senior center or something like that, where you're just practicing being in front of an audience. This was really big, especially post-pandemic, where people were singing by themselves in, maybe their family's kitchen or in a shared space in an apartment building. The idea of singing for a live audience, people had to get used to it again. On the topic of practice, the practice has to happen so far ahead of the audition. If you are in the car on the way to an audition trying to memorize one of the arias on your list that you hope they're not calling, that's not setting yourself up for the best. Because again, think about what you can control. Memorize this early so that you are working with this text, with this language, and it's off book. And same thing with the technical aspects of it. It's doubtful that a miracle is going to occur on the stage that day when you're feeling nervous and vulnerable and exposed. At that point, you have to trust your preparation, which means the preparation must have been done in advance. Every now and then, you'll hear someone say like, oh yeah, it's the first time I sang that in public. And it's great when that goes well. When it doesn't, it's not great. So what can you control? Because on the audition day, so many things can happen that just set you off of your game. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. That's why you have to just prepare early and often, and also trust that will get you through if you get thrown kind of a curveball the day of the audition.
Sure. At these kind of competitions, is the pianist brought in with the artist? Do they have their own pianist that comes with them, or is a pianist provided and playing for several artists?
So at the Met competition, we provide a pianist for everyone, and you are also able to bring in your own pianist.
What separates competitions like this from something like Nats, where someone can go at a very young age and kind of start to be in front of people and start to get some feedback from other voice teachers? How does this differ from competitions like that?
Sure. The Met competition is a professionally facing competition and it's attached to a professional company. So we don't have academic requirements.
Mhm.
And even just looking at the languages, we ask for just 2 different languages because we want to see what you do really well. We don't want to see the breadth of all of the things that you might be able to do pretty well. So that is one big shift, is when people have professional careers, almost everyone, especially at the beginning, they're specialists, not generalists. But the way that we train people academically, of course, is to give people a general look at what the industry entails.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one big difference, is we're not looking to check the box that, yes, you can sing in Italian, German, and French in different style periods. We do want to get a sense that you can sing in more than just one way. So if it's all slow legato arias, that doesn't show us really all the things that you can do, most likely, because opera does require that you do more than just sing slow legato arias.
Right.
So that is one thing. I think the other is that you are there representing yourself. You're not there representing your teacher or your school.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea, again, that you are taking ownership as an artist of what you're putting out there is, I think, a big difference. And I think also just in terms of the feedback, and I never participated in Nats to know what that feedback situation is like. When singers ask me, am I ready for the Met competition? I frequently say, if you feel like you are ready to get feedback on the arias that you can present right now, that is one of the big steps. So that's another part of it, is to get truly professional level feedback of people who are hiring and casting emerging artist level singers.
Mm-hmm.
That's the level that they're listening to all the time, and they're going to let you know what they are and are not hearing.
Sure. Do you have kind of a grading scale?
I have a rubric based on those 4 categories, just to help the judges kind of organize their thoughts, but it's not a numerical thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of just a way to self-organize, but we don't just compare numbers at the end of it, but it's a way for them to track what their thoughts were along the way.
Mm-hmm.
For the pre-screening videos, I have a numerical scale that my colleagues and I adhere to because we're listening to different people. And so to us, we know what 4 minus means and 3 plus. And those are things that just, it's really just an internal thing that makes sense to us. But I have, again, like a written down method with it. When we get to the semis and finals, it does become much more mathematical. But along the way, it's, at the district and region rounds, we're having a lot more discussion in the judging room than we are at the semis and finals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hearing the evaluation criteria of the 4 categories makes so much sense to me, because coming into the conversation, I was thinking, how can you have within a competition different high voices and different low voices and compare one to the other?
A 20-year-old versus a 30-year-old,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right. Yeah, so it makes perfect sense that you would have different categories of what you're looking for. I love that. Transitioning a little bit into the Lindemann Young Artist Development Program. For this program, have you seen many of them already in competitions before someone auditions for this program?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you've already seen them step up into being able to hear different feedback and how they're going to handle that feedback, and throughout several years or over some time.
Absolutely. The Met competition is definitely one of the ways that we get to know singers across North America.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I adjudicate competitions internationally. So it helps me understand what my international colleagues are listening for and kind of listening with, and get a sense of the singer training on an international level, because Lindemann is international.
Mhm.
So the international competitions are a big way that we are looking at Lindemann, potential Lindemann artists. And then also that's where we go and spend some time at other companies and festivals and summer festivals, because getting to see the artists in roles, even if they're small roles, is really beneficial,
Mhm.
because Lindemann isn't a competition. You know,
Mhm.
it's a development program. So for me to get a sense of like, how is this person on stage? Can they portray a character? How were they to work with for that festival? You know, that's the personality aspect, and the way that everyone comes together as a group is really important, because it's
Mm.
a small group of 15 artists.
Right.
So on the Lindemann side, it's a different process. It really is. And also thinking about, is this someone that needs our program? Do they need further development, or are they ready to work?
Mhm.
You know, I think one of the important things for emerging artists to remember is that getting into young artist programs isn't the goal. The goal is to be a working professional, is to be an
Mhm.
artist. And there are many times where I have conversations with singers throughout the year to just say, you're telling me you have an offer of a fest in Europe where you get to sing 4 roles. Do that. Do that. Go do the thing, because that's the goal, the ultimate goal.
Right. I mean, among programs, this is an incredibly elite program. So to be able to experience a young artist development program such as the Lindemann program, first of all, it's just been so incredible to see in it this year. So thank you for having me. But seeing these artists and how they come together, and they truly form a family. They have a support network going out into the professional career with friends just really behind them. I've been so inspired and awed by their support of one another.
Absolutely. It's really, really special. And that's why I'm also pretty protective of that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the personality blend and maturity is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me today. It's such an honor to be able to work with you and to be able to experience a side of performance and of music within the opera world that I certainly wouldn't have seen without the experience that you have given me this year at the Linneman program, but also to see you and how wonderfully compassionate and thoughtful you give feedback, and how you give honest, true feedback in such a beautiful, compassionate way. And I think that that really says a lot about all of the work that you have done, about all of the work that you've observed. Oh, but I did have one more question before we end.
Sure.
And that is, you're a mom. So
Yes.
you do all of this work and all of this travel, and you're also a mom. And as a fellow mom, I love to bring this into the conversation that it is possible to be a career woman and to be a mother at the same time. How do you make that work?
You know, I think being a mom helps me find more balance. I
Mm-hmm.
think I have always been someone who tends towards being a workaholic because I love it so much. And yet, even if I love it a lot, I mean, I don't know, love salted caramel, but if I have that all the time, it's not great, right? And so if I work too much, it's not great, even though I love it. And so that built in balance check and life check has been really, really helpful to me. And it is also really inspiring to get to see a little one get to experience the world, including how I choose to introduce the work that we do, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And that's really special. So I think that it has been nothing but helpful. It does take a level of coordination, and there is a level of, you just say no to more. so that you can protect the things that you really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's healthy. It's worked well for us so far. And also, what we do, I think, is extremely important in our work. And thank you for saying all those very kind things about the compassion and everything. But I'll tell you, when you start your day with the toddler pitching a fit, before 7:30 in the morning, and you get yourself through that and get them to school and all of that, it's like the rest of the day, you just have a different perspective on it.
Mm.
You just do.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a better ability to zoom out now than I did 5 years ago, and a better ability to just kind of even deal with moods, my own moods and those of people around me. It's like we're just emotional creatures. I think also, I will say that it changed the way that I think about people attending events, attending the arts. Because when you realize how expensive it is for people to get a babysitter, go out to dinner, and go see an opera for 3 hours, it has to be really, really good. It has to be really, really interesting. It has to be, if you want them to come back again.
Right.
When you think about people maybe working a long day and going to see an opera that starts at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, there is a reason why the average age of opera has been a bit older.
Mm-hmm.
I totally understand that. I think it's important to also keep that into consideration as we think about the different access points that people in their life can reach what we're doing. But it really did help me, I think, be a little bit more precise and exacting, maybe. Again, I try to do that with empathy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important that we understand what we're asking people to do by sharing the space of a theater with us.
Right. Right. That was an eye-opening experience for my husband and I. The very first performance we went out to see once we had our daughter, and, the cost of the tickets and the babysitter, as you said, and dinner. And we were like, oh my, we got home and we said, well, that was a $750 night.
Yep.
Okay.
Especially for people who are coming from like outside of New York City, just using New York as an example, that might be their one big trip of the year or of 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, there's great responsibility there. And I know that performers put a lot of pressure on themselves to be able to do what they do. But it also, like I said, from my corner of the industry, it makes me feel a sense of responsibility of how we are allowing performers to have breaks, to have rest, so that they can show up with all of who they are and do what they need to do. I come from this kind of ethos that people tend to do better when they're not coming from a place of fear and shame.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the way I choose to move through the world, through the industry. And yet I also know some people respond really well to more of a didactic. They need a very strong yes and no. Mm-hmm. So part of what I do in Lindemann is we establish a sense of trust so that then we can pivot to how is the best way that I can help you realize what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very apparent from coming in this year and seeing the program. And I just think that the work that you're doing is absolutely incredible, very inspiring. I love seeing you work with the artists. I love having every conversation we've had. And I just think you are a very special person. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to get to know you and certainly to have this conversation. I'm glad that the listeners can get a little piece into or a little view into your life. So thank you, Melissa, so much for being here with me and having this conversation today.
Thank you, Christine. And I mean, you are such an incredible part of our team. And I'm so thrilled that we were we came together this year to do this work, because I think the more people that we have kind of invested in the same philosophy just helps everything grow.
Yeah. Grow and support and flourish.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, tell your colleagues, students, and friends. Subscribe, rate, and please write a review. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook, and feel free to check out my website at www.thevisceralvoice.com for information on programs and upcoming events. I hope you join us next time for another wonderful conversation on The Visceral Voice.